In the weeks since the Supreme Court struck down key parts of President Trump's agenda, the White House has sought creative workarounds to advance those priorities anyway. Trump's issued new tariffs under a different statute. He's renewed efforts to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, sending her a new letter alleging she engaged in mortgage fraud. And he's put out a new executive order to limit birthright citizenship, only this time it's much narrower. With me now is expert James Sample, professor of law at Hofstra University and former attorney at the Brennan Center for Justice's Democracy Program. James, it is always good to see you, although we're not always talking about good things when we are at this table together. I want to start with just what you make of this White House and their efforts right now to circumvent the rulings we saw just weeks ago.
The birthright citizenship aspect, that is outrageous. Now, some of those other ones, moving tariffs to a different statute, that's the kind of thing a president, a proper president or an administration can do, right? It's at least on firmer ground. At least this time we're talking about more targeted tariffs. We're talking about some statutory authority actually existing with respect to Lisa Cook. The Supreme Court did say on her case that we're going to allow, she was not given reasons, she was not given an opportunity to respond, that at minimum she's entitled to some process. So on those two, while one may disagree with the merits of what the administration is pushing, at least they're responding to the court in an appropriate legal framework. With respect to birthright citizenship, 5 weeks after the Supreme Court said unequivocally that individuals who are born on U.S. soil are citizens of the United States, regardless of parentage, with the lone exception, basically, of diplomatic immunity, the administration basically doubled down and made this as though they marketed this as though it's about birthright tourism, birth tourism. That's not at all what it is about. And the marketing doesn't hold up. So they identified 4 categories of people that they would like to exclude from birthright citizenship. Children of alien enemies. We saw the Alien Enemies Act earlier a year ago. That is not alien. We can prosecute them. The United States freezes their assets, puts individuals in criminal incarceration because that means they're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. In the language of the 14th Amendment, that means that even if one qualifies as this, there's plenty of basis to prosecute them, they're not immune. Individuals who are children of foreign government employees. So if you are a staff hire at an embassy, for example, you don't have diplomatic immunity. Right. You are an employee. So you are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. This is out. And then birth tourism. The way to handle birth tourism is through the visa process and through authorities that the United States does have. If the administration really wanted to address these, what they perceive to be significant problems, and the statistics on this are...
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot less birth tourism.
It is not
like a Fox News segment. You might think there is out there, actually.
Penn State did a study that said that that birth tourism accounts for approximately 0.3% of the birthright citizenship in the United States. If you wanted to address birth tourism, though, you could address it through actual authority that we have. You could address it at the consulate. You could count the numbers more fairly. John Sauer, at oral argument in the Supreme Court, acknowledged the administration has no idea what the number is. Or you could address it in a number of different ways. This scheme is designed to make it more difficult for individuals, babies, who are born in the United States to establish their citizenship through paperwork. The cruelty, Antonia, is the point. This is not the kind of proposal you would come up with if you were really trying to solve a problem. This is the kind of proposal you would come up with if you're trying to politically grandstand and to make people's lives harder.
Well, there's the administration's sort of effort to define who counts here in the interior and to remove those that they do not see as being part of the American fabric. But then there's also this sort of constantly unfolding story about this administration's posture abroad and in our hemisphere. And something that I think went under the radar was this very interesting video the State Department put out this week, basically embracing the Monroe Doctrine and embracing the United States as this imperial power that has the right to very aggressively assert its dominance in country after country in this hemisphere, in this region. Something that, like, you know, left-wing academics have been warning this country has been doing all along, right? And people denied. But the Trump administration is kind of coming out in this video and saying, yep, that's who we are. That's what we're doing. This is the era. Not that we're entering, but I guess that we're going back to. And as you see what's the sort of split screen between how we operate here at home and define what we are here and how we are treating people abroad. What are you seeing about this administration and its sort of vision of this presidency?
I'm not in Donald Trump's head, but it appears that he believes that what he did in Venezuela with Maduro has been one of the biggest successes, as he defines that term, of his second term. And so whether one agrees or disagrees with that normative posture, with that evaluative posture, it's what he clearly believes. And I think that he is trying to double down on that. You're seeing it in Cuba, you're seeing it around the Western Hemisphere, and you're seeing this idea that the United States gets to dictate to the entire Western Hemisphere who its leaders are. You know, there was a very powerful exchange during the immediate aftermath of the Venezuela scenario where Maduro was seized, where Rand Paul essentially posed the question to Marco Rubio: if some other nation did this in the United States, regardless of who the leader is, whether you like the leader, whether the leader's a criminal, which Maduro may well be, right? If another country came in with military force, kidnapped your leader, and spirited him to their country to face trial, what would you describe that as? Marco Rubio's answer was a law enforcement matter. Rand Paul's answer was
war crime,
an act of war.
You know, I take this, I see this as part of the sort of broader story, too, about what's happening domestically, because at the same time, the Trump administration has been striking these deals with different countries, many of them autocratic countries in Africa, for example. And that's where they are deporting many of these people who they are pushing out of the country, who in some cases tried to do everything the right way, come here. For example, Cuban immigrants who, the Trump administration is both arguing that, their country is a complete mess and has terrible leadership to the point where a Venezuela scenario may become necessary in the coming days and weeks. But they're also going to push Cubans out of the United States, make it impossible for them to have a pathway to citizenship, and then send them to these third-party countries, some of them in prisons now. I mean, I just wonder sort of what the legacy of some of this is going to be and how any future administration on both the domestic and international front is going to be able to undo some of the damage that's going to be done.
I will say I love the way you frame that, Antonia. I really do, because it's human.
But there might not be an answer to it.
Well, it's human. And that matters. The fact that you frame that as a matter of human rights, that also matters. And to
me, there's just no consistency in the story being told.
Well, and there's no process. A process is not sexy television. But you know what? Process really matters. And where we saw that, and I think where the nation even maybe for a second took notice of it, was in the middle of the night, dark of night deportations to SCOTUS. Yes. Individuals alleged to be Tren de Aragua with no opportunity to say otherwise, sent to, in essence, a torture facility that the United States was essentially facilitating. That is the kind of thing where we are picking and choosing which human beings are entitled to rights. And for those who say, well, that would never happen to me, if you're not entitled to process and you don't get process, it could happen to you and you wouldn't have any way to test it. That's the point.
Your rights on paper do not matter unless there's a process to ensure that someone will defend them. James Sample, thank you so much.